in the background.
We're live.
Welcome! We're
hello,
back,
welcome.
Brandon!
Well, yes. I mean,
as in I am back.
Welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. I am Brandon Tessers.
I am Caitlin Miller.
We are both licensed therapists, but this is not therapy for very, very many reasons.
For so many reasons, a million reasons. If you ask Brandon, he'll be able to list them all. Oh, I don't know, man. I might be more confident in your capacities.
A million is so many. It would take, I don't know, months just to name 1 million.
Okay, let's say 7. 7 is like a good, strong archetypal number. Yeah.
What this is just an open conversation. Caitlin and I are here talking with one another and talking with you all. We're doing our best to make our guesses about who you are and what you're interested in and how we're impacting you, how we're coming across to you. For those of you who are willing and able to participate in the chat, we appreciate it because that gives us more information on which to base those guesses about who you are and what you're interested in, how we're impacting you.
You can ask us any question on your mind.
You can. And it doesn't even just have to be questions. It's just a conversation. Like anything, when humans pay attention to something, whatever they're noticing impacts how they think and how they feel and how they behave. And we're paying attention to you. You're paying attention to us. We go where we go. So also please don't hold back or worry about whether, if you are willing and able to participate in the chat, don't worry about whether you're on topic or there's nothing like that. Don't worry about interrupting or anything like that. That's not how conversation works. It's certainly not how this works.
We also love being interrupted. We're totally like social norm disruptors.
True. Although that's an interesting one. We've talked about it a bunch on the stream, but well, we'll leave it at that for now.
Do your shtick, Brandon. Keep going.
Yeah, we work with a therapy practice called Effective Artistry. Our office is in Northbrook, Illinois. We work with individuals in the states of Illinois and Wisconsin. We do individual, couples, family, and group therapy. When comments do come in, we do our best to read them out as they come in because we're streaming on 3 different platforms simultaneously, and each of you will only see comments that come in from the platform you're on. If you're on Facebook, you'll see Facebook comments and so on. So we try to read them out so that everybody's more or less on the same page. Yeah. That's good. It is good to see you. Caitlin and I, obviously, we interact fairly regularly and we get to talk to each other outside of the stream. That's part of why we're focused on talking with you all, right? What you're interested in. But you used to be on the stream more or less weekly for
quite some time.
A while.
Yeah.
Maybe a year or so.
Yeah.
But
maybe a year or so.
What?
Probably 2 years. I've been at Effective Artistry for almost 5 years. This August, it's going to be 5 years. That's half a decade, Brandon. We have worked together for 5.5 years, almost 6.
Yes, because we worked together at a different practice before I started Effective Artistry.
And we look exactly the same and nothing has changed. Just kidding.
I mean, you look pretty similar, I feel like.
Yeah.
I didn't have long hair when we first met. So.
Oh, yeah. You did the whole like philosopher hermit thing when you started your own business. Or maybe her medical philosopher.
I always had long hair. Not always, but like ever since I was in control of my hair, I kept it longer. It would get cut for like plays and things like that. And then when I graduated from undergrad and moved out to Chicago, just for fun, I like buzzed my head. The first time I ever had like cut my hair that short.
A travesty.
And so when I got to Chicago and then I first met Susan, my hair was like shorter. And I was keeping it short at that time for a little bit. And then like there was several years where I would talk about wanting to grow it out longer again. And she was like, no. And then, yes, when COVID started, it was a good opportunity to start growing it out longer again. And then by the time like it got out long enough, she was like, oh, yeah, you were right. I should have let you do that earlier. So in my mind, it was me going back to the way that I always liked to keep my hair. But I did have it short for like, I don't know, 10 years.
Mm.
In my mind, those
I
10
would like to
years.
talk to you about creativity today, if we don't have people comment. We haven't talked about it in so long in our individual conversations.
Okay, what do you want to talk about?
I don't know. I don't know specifically. But I feel like
Yeah.
it's such a wonderful point of connection.
Well, I'll say generally in our work, we try to focus on like what is on people's mind, you know, what's in your working memory at that point. And people will sometimes do this where it's like, here's a topic, but I don't have a particular thought or question about it, which is great. But also sometimes can be what someone's doing when they're trying to like bring up a topic they think is important, but isn't actually on their mind.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But we can still talk about it anyway. I just like to make the point.
I have so many things on my mind right now, but they're primarily like cranking through to-do lists that I have obligated myself towards all things that are good and exciting, but that must, yeah,
Have
many
you and I
things.
spoken about how to-do lists are detrimental?
Yeah, and doing like time blocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm organizing a festival about healing and community at my mother's store. It's going to happen August 8th, 2026. And so right now I'm just doing a master to-do list to get the idea of like all of the things that have to happen, but then I'm chunking it up into like blocks and having it, but like just the whole spread to get the idea, because there's a lot that goes into having a
I
music
bet.
festival. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
I've
just had
never.
a meeting with her this morning, and so yeah, it is. I use to-do lists sparingly, but in some of these like things that require 1,000 tasks that I've never done before, I feel like that's where the utility of the to-do list shifts.
Well, so to clarify, like writing down a bunch of tasks is not a bad thing inherently. I
Yeah.
know this is like a tricky or nuanced sounding thing. This gets into like language and how we conceptualize things, but language matters.
Hmm.
And yeah, when you're trying to navigate something complex or that has like a lot of different tasks, you don't want to carry all that stuff in your mind. You want to be
Yes.
able to record it. But there's ways to do that are more helpful and ways that to do that are less helpful. And
Hmm.
so, as silly as it sounds, calling something, including thinking of, you know, conceptualizing something as a to-do list, it's likely to
Maybe I'll call it like a master plan. Like sort
well,
of like
sure.
the almost like if I have a client who's doing like a senior thesis or something in college, that like having some sort of outline of like once I finish the paper, then I present it to my thesis advisor, and then I do the presentation, and then I have the board decide blah blah blah, yippity yippity yippity.
So, the to-do list stuff we're talking about is research based. This isn't just opinion and logic, although it has that too. And
Hmm.
there's really two things to watch out for. And one of them is not relevant to what you're talking about at all. So one of
Hmm.
the problems with to-do lists, we're talking about when people use them as like an ongoing way to manage their life, not just for a specific task, breaking it down or whatever. Because one of the
Yeah.
issues with to-do lists is that people will put too much stuff on there.
Yeah.
Basically, that when you're
Yeah.
evaluating whether to add it to your to-do list, you're just like, would this be valuable, helpful, beneficial in some way? If so, let me throw it on there with no thought for the cost. And so you end
Hmm.
up with like way too much stuff on there. The
And
other
then that sort
downside,
of image of the ideal self in which the to-do list is complete and you are much happier and healthier or whatever. And then there's like chasing after this ghost, and yeah, that's
so that's the other side, is that by conceptualizing it as a to-do list, then like emotion gets involved in unhelpful ways,
yeah,
and that part can be
yeah.
relevant even. So this isn't to say that it's not good or important to like break down a bunch of tasks on paper. That's,
Hmm.
I would say, necessary for something like what you're trying to accomplish, especially when more than one person's involved and you need to communicate with one another about all the things
Yeah.
that need to be handled and who's doing what.
Hmm.
Um, So the first thing is not relevant to what you're experiencing. The second thing is, which is that emotionality. And yes, you're talking about, I like your language about people thinking of it as their ideal self who's accomplished all those things. In practice, though, that's not what typically happens. In practice, what we're talking about is that people feel badly if they don't get all the things on the to-do list done.
Yeah.
There will be some sense of achievement when you like cross something off of the list, but there's rarely ever a sense of like joy at finishing the to-do list because nobody ever finishes it.
Yep.
So yeah, talking about it or thinking about it as a plan or whatever is great because then you can liberate yourself a bit.
I feel like the to-do list could serve as a metaphor for the myth of self-actualization, because you would assume that if a to-do list is completed, I have then achieved something, but then part of the function of a to-do list following you around in your conscious life is just this. I'm never done with this.
When you say the myth of self-actualization, what are you talking about? I'm curious.
I'm talking about how at least a lot of my clients and myself, I feel like we were taught from birth, well, especially in this school system and potentially getting identified as like talented or gifted or whatever, of like, well, this is how you can do 10% better and better and better and better. And if you're not always striving to like meet some sort of measurable metric from an outside source to show that you have improved, even if you are already deemed relatively valuable by quite a broken system, it's still not enough. And so I guess that's, and that at the end of that part of the myth is that self-actualization has an endpoint and you're totally happy and you don't have to keep striving. So there's like a sort of like an endpoint that doesn't ever exist. That's part of the mythical component, I would say.
I agree with everything you're saying. I would say that's maybe the most like insidious definition of self-actualization that I've ever heard. You know, like the idea that you must always be striving to meet or exceed like external metrics or whatever.
Oh, wasn't that an Adlerian term, self-actualization, or who was that? What wasn't there a psychologist?
I don't know who developed it. It's part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Okay.
So
I don't mean it in a Maslowian way, or however you would say that. How would you say that, Brandon?
No, sure, Maslowian. I don't know.
Maslowian. I love words so much. Oh my god,
you do. You and
great.
I love
they
words
give me
in different
every
ways.
time. Such different ways. It's like the opposite, but we love them still. You're much more precise, sir. I just like the sounds. The sounds.
I do strive for precision, not in everything per se, but in a lot. And
you've helped me so much, dude. So much.
One example of that is I do like to try and make it clear what I mean by precision, what precision generally means.
Tell us what granularity means and as it relates to precision in language, Brandon.
In a minute. Not very related concepts, honestly.
Oh no! This is
the
an
thing
example
is
of how we're
people
the opposite.
often think that precision means like being precise means being correct, right? Like, especially when talking about language, people have a tendency to think that using language precisely means using it correctly, meaning like, are you using words in the way that they are defined by the dictionary, which is worth considering, but really doesn't matter that much. It matters in the same way that like conventions of grammar and spelling matter, in the sense that like language, when you're using it as shared language to communicate with other people, like the more that you have shared conventions to reference, the likelier it is that somebody will interpret your meaning accurately. Right. But precision isn't about like whether you're using words correctly, or it doesn't just apply to words or language, but we're talking about language right now. Precision is about using one thing to mean one thing, basically. Being precise. So every word I use could be different than the way that the dictionary defines it, or different than the way that other people might use it. But if I have one word that means one specific thing and I only use it to mean that specific thing, and then a different word to mean one specific thing and so on, That's precision. So as opposed to the way that we kind of naturally learn and use language, which isn't to say that it's not precise. It is. We just can't be precise. We end up with conflated terms, concepts. Where like, if you ask
Yeah,
most
I'm
people,
thinking about my idea of self-actualization in like sort of a darker capitalistic sense is
yeah, I've never
also
heard
joined up with,
anyone.
yeah, exactly. But I feel like it's also joined up with like rugged individualism and
It
like,
seems. Here's my guess. I'm just going to guess. I'm like reverse
okay,
engineering.
please read my mind, Brandon Tussers.
It's not about reading your mind. It's I like to try and like get to where connections were made that somebody uses a particular term or thought or phrase for something.
Yes, yes,
It's
yes.
really helpful in our work, right?
Oh, absolutely. I love doing this with clients. Sometimes they get a little mad at me when I do it, but it's typically quite helpful.
I'm guessing that this conceptualization of self-actualization is routed through potential. I think that's what you're talking about is the concept, especially as related to like talented and gifted people. This idea of potential, the you that you could eventually be to reach your potential. And there are ways in which potential and self-actualization get linked together. Although everything you're saying, I think, is largely about the way that people talk about potential. Like it's something that you can reach and now you're done. You have reached your potential.
I like that. I like using that because I do think if I were to, let's say, make a video about it or post a podcast about self-actualization and I'm using the term totally differently than other people, I feel like it could be quite useful to have potential so it doesn't
Well, I'll
get
say
mixed
that
up with like Maslow.
most people don't use the term self-actualization at all. And
Yep.
for those who do, for the most part, it lives in that world of language where it's like, even if we've heard of it, we have a vague sense of what it means or the area in which it is used. And if you're listening to somebody to talk about it, you'll just kind of go along with like, okay, cool, without really questioning what they
Yep.
mean.
That's the other thing about precision in language is the more you know what you mean, the more you can actually communicate with other people.
Well, that's true. Although if by communicate you're referring to like get it so that other people more or less accurately interpret your meaning out of things, there's some truth to that, but that's limited because we have very limited ability to influence the way that other people use language. Now, the more that you're interacting with the same person over and over, then we learn each other's language. And yes, being precise consistently will make it so that it becomes more likely that that person's going to understand you better as time goes on. But I will say that it helps with a lot of things. It helps with memory, for one. You know, that when we talk about like anger and irritation and frustration and annoyance, these are all words that everybody uses sometimes. Sometimes people will be like, I'm annoyed. And sometimes people will literally say like, I'm not mad, I'm just annoyed. I'm not mad, I'm just frustrated. But for the most part, there are differences there to us. There's something meaningful in that moment in which you say, I'm not mad, I'm frustrated. You mean something. But then that moment passes and the day goes by and the next day or a month later or years later, if we ask you like, what's the difference between being mad and being frustrated? It's usually, if there's any answer, a person will just be like, it's a degree of intensity, right? Like mad is like more mad, where frustrated is just like not as mad, or frustrated is just like, it's bad to be mad. I'm not mad, but frustrated is not bad. Like that's the only difference. And then all of it just gets conflated in your mind and you don't remember whether you were mad or frustrated or irritated, or even though in the moment later on you don't. So it helps with memory, it helps with self-understanding, and it helps then to communicate with other people in the sense that it helps you to understand other people so much better. This is so like, whatever, but I'll say, when I teach people about listening, which is very important in our line of work, I say that there's like, I break it up into 4 components. Listening to another person has 4 components. There's listening to what that person actually says, like the specifics, the words that they're using, the tone, the body, like picking up on the data that is being presented to you.
1, 2.
It is listening to what they don't say, which is there's like fun ways of phrasing things, but listening to
The
what they don't say.
the woo-woo person in me is like, ooh, listen to what they don't say. Ooh, esotericism. But I know that's not how you mean it.
Well, it's not, but it's also, I think that way of talking about things might be somewhat referencing what I am talking about, just in a different way.
Yeah. Adjacent. Okay, 3.
Is talking. You have to speak to that person.
Yes. Oh,
And then
okay, 4.
4 is listening to yourself, listening to what you're saying. Because I would say that the most, like if you're trying to understand a person, not just understand what they're trying to communicate to you in a given moment, because for that, to get the meaning of a person's words, you only need the first one. That's why everybody's focused on that first piece, just listening to what they actually say. To get the meaning, you can get it through that. But if you want to understand a person, or like how to be helpful to them, or what might be going on behind the scenes, then you need the others too. The most useful.
Talk about how that influences the others.
Oh, all right. So when I say listening to what people don't say, what I mean is, I try to train people to have an understanding about like cost and value, and that all communication has a cost, right? Saying something costs you something, even if the cost is minuscule, whatever, it costs something. And the brain is a cognitive miser, right? We don't spend resources without a reason. So anything that a person says, they are saying as opposed to any other thing that they could have said instead, and as opposed to saying nothing at all, which always would have been the cheaper option. So frequently people will say something and you'll respond to it and they'll be like, it's not important. I didn't really mean it. Like, it doesn't matter, whatever. And I understand that response, usually where people are coming from, but they said it. There's a reason that they said it, even if it's not a consciously identified reason. There was some identification by some processes that would be something that is worth spending resources to say, as opposed to any other thing that they could have said or nothing at all.
And I like the word some there because you're acknowledging that it's not always like fully conscious.
Oh, language selection is very rarely conscious at all.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons that like therapy is based around communication. Talk therapy is talk therapy. It's an incredibly, incredibly impactful activity. I mean, it has effects on us that people genuinely just don't recognize at all. They will in some contexts, right? Everybody knows.
Can you
that
try to put
says,
language to that? Because it's kind of fascinating.
Well,
what are some of the impacts of therapy
and provocative in how I could say it?
Those are good for sound bites.
The conscious person, the ego, whatever, is composed of language. That's it. There's nothing else to it.
That is so provocative.
Yeah.
The ego is all language? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the consciousness, the conscious self, any idea of consciousness or conscious self is just composed of language. That's what I mean. Think a thought without utilizing language. And when we're talking about this kind of intrapersonal language, it's important to know that what we're talking about is symbolic representation, not necessarily like a word per se. But consciousness is abstract thought. We have to assign an abstract representation, a symbol. We have to give it meaning, connect it to the thing which it represents. So anything that happens in consciousness is all language, all of it. No, there's a very it doesn't usually matter for the most part in people's lives, right? It doesn't usually matter to distinguish the difference between, am I seeing this thing, or am I just perceiving a symbolic representation of something which theoretically exists in the physical environment? Like, that's pedantic and ridiculous to get into. But sometimes that differentiation really matters. And that's a big part of what's happening in therapy, is identifying the distinction between like what is conscious thought and what is reality. Which isn't to say like talking about it in terms of hallucinations or psychotic effect, psychotic experiences.
Sometimes I picture that with clients as untangling a bunch of like knots in a braid or something, like what happened in 3-dimensional reality that other people could observe, what was cognition, what did the cognition like mean to you? What impact did it have on your environment? What impact did it have on your being? And just like sometimes it feels like
Especially,
therapy is taking like a huge knot of hair or like or string and just taking them out. And then sometimes,
sometimes.
especially with relationships and long-term relationships, like I'm thinking about working with couples who've been together for a while, to be able to say, "Oh, that was never real in three-dimensional reality. It was real in my mind and it felt awful, but it wasn't ever something that happened explicitly."
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's
And
sometimes is
still
what we do.
validating the like emotions and the responses to it as well. It's not,
Well,
but
I
it can,
mean, differentiating between interpretation and observation is, like the number of times that someone will be like, they are so mad at me or whatever. And then trying
mm-hmm,
to, okay, how do you know that they're mad at you? Oh, they
mm-hmm,
are, right? Like it's just a given reality. And it's not even necessary. Sometimes it is true that, like, when we get down to the observed reality of what happened, we realize that there's like other interpretations that maybe they're not mad at you. Maybe it was this other thing instead that happens.
yeah,
And frequently, maybe that happens.
yeah,
But even when it is, it's not that it's intended for that purpose to go down this path. Because it can be that we're like, okay, well, they said they were mad at me. Okay, great. Like the most reasonable conclusion is that they're mad at you. I agree.
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm,
even when that's the case, it's still useful to differentiate what is like the concept or the idea or the takeaway versus what is the behavior, what is the reality.
mm-hmm,
Uh,
mm-hmm. I
so
also love telling people what I think their worst fear is and helping them be less afraid of it.
that
So
can be
like
great.
I'm thinking about couples therapy with like it seems like you're terrified that you're the monster, um, and that you're a
You could
horrible
say that
person.
to pretty much anybody in a romantic dyad. Um, and yes, it would hit, right? Like everybody is
Hmm.
worried that they're the monster.
Yeah,
Women
I was thinking
typically
about
more
writing
so.
a yeah, I was thinking about writing a Substack essay about how we've been incentivized to be afraid of ourselves and publishing it at some point. And I started writing it, and I had this image of like where the lion, where the cage around the lion, and where the tamer with the whip, and like just this, I don't know.
Well, I mean, that seems obviously like you just said a couple sentences. I don't know the depth of what you're talking about, but from what you've said, that seems very much aligned with like Jungian shadow work stuff, right? That,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I do think that it's unpleasant experiences, especially unpleasant emotional experiences, fear and shame
Mm-hmm.
and anger and sadness and all these things, they serve a purpose, right? And so I would suggest that it is like adaptive, important that we are afraid of ourselves, if I catch your meaning correctly, in some ways to some extent, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that, for example, shame, which is a terribly unpleasant emotion and very damaging, potentially at least very damaging, always unpleasant, potentially very damaging,
Mm-hmm.
gets used way too much and applied to all kinds of things that it shouldn't be applied to, and it causes terrible problems. That doesn't mean that it's shame, that shame in and of itself is a bad thing that we should never feel. It's an important
Mm-hmm.
like corrective experience, or maybe not
Mm-hmm.
corrective, sometimes preventative. Like it, we
Yeah,
have some
the thing
concept
I
of
was,
what is pro-social behavior, and we have some
yeah.
intrinsic desire to match that, as
Oh,
we should.
totally, yeah. The thing I was thinking about more was like self-policing behaviors and always looking for ways that we've like done something bad or wrong or not been good enough. Like that sort of caging yourself and
Well,
being terrified of yourself, and also how it manifests with over pathologizing behaviors. Um,
that's interesting. Um, I would say that, what you're talking about there, people would often refer to as like self-criticism. Maybe, if it's intense enough, take it into like self-loathing or self-hatred. as opposed to fear. But I think there is a lens of fear to look at there that we talk about a lot, where, so 4 universal existential fears.
1,
Death.
2,
Meaninglessness,
3,
isolation, and
4.
freedom. Freedom's the last one. And everyone gets confused. So the
Mhm.
existential universal fears are 4 fears that like all humans have and each individual human has at all times. That doesn't mean that you're always presently aware of it in that moment.
Mhm.
It just means that at any moment in which a person becomes aware of it, there is an inherent dislike of that possibility, right?
Mhm.
Death obviously is death. Meaninglessness is, nothing means anything. Part of that is insignificance, like how small we are. But part of that is a recognition that like the universe is chaos and we just impose order upon it because it's useful. Isolation is that idea of course, there's like the physically being alone version of it, but what we're talking about in the existential fears is like the conscious you has no ability to interact with the universe or other people at all. No one will ever, ever, under any circumstances, have a 100% understanding of what's going on inside of your mind, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
These are universal fears because they are relevant to like the way that things work, right? Like
Mhm.
those 3 things, death and meaninglessness and isolation, those things are just true and there's nothing we can do about them. And
Mhm.
if we liked or enjoyed those things, like we would not have evolved to be successful in the way that we are, right? Like working against those things is a default part of how we're constructed. Then
Mhm.
everyone gets confused with freedom at the end because that one sounds nice.
Mhm.
But freedom, the way that it's easiest to make people understand it is to say that it comes with responsibility. That if you are free, then this is an extreme extrapolation, but this is how far we can take it, is that literally anything and everything that happens, you've chosen to make happen. Everything, no matter how much you hate it, no matter how much you're opposed to it, you've chosen to make that thing happen because you're free and you could do other things, including things that could have prevented or stopped that thing. So when people are feeling guilty about the state of the world and like they're not doing enough or hopeless or desperate, that's fear of freedom, a version of it. So
Can we
talking about
connect that for a second? So it's fear of freedom because the person feels as though maybe they could have like helped more with climate change by recycling or like doing like climate change activism or something.
I
Or
would
like
say that
it,
that's like a simplified application of it, but I would say that that
yeah.
falls into that, yes. But
Okay.
more like that's the kind of example that I think makes it easier for people to understand. But more what we're talking about is like a person's life. So again, this is overly
Mhm.
simplified, but think of a person who is very sad and they're upset with themselves for being sad because they, why am I not happy? Why am I like this? Right?
Mhm.
They're treating the thing that's happening as though it is a result of something that they chose and that they could choose differently.
Mhm.
Uh, and there's like some truth to that and some not truth. It gets, we could talk for hours and hours and hours just about like what exactly this fear of freedom is. But another way to say it, not another way to say it, a different thing we can talk about to capture the part that I'm trying to bring up right now is talking
Mhm.
about power. That like
Mhm.
the more that you have power, certainly the more that you have responsibility for what's happening, right? If you had the ability
Mhm.
to snap your fingers and anything in the world was different, then it would very much be true that whatever's happening in the world is something that you are choosing to happen because you could choose differently.
Mhm.
Whereas if you're someone who, no matter how hard you try, there's nothing you can do to impact the state of the world, and that includes, most importantly, your own life and experience in it,
Mhm.
then things may be terrible, but you're not choosing it, right?
Mhm.
And that's cognitively a desirable state given certain things that are very prevalent in our culture, right? That like fault really matters and things like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, as a general rule, people in our culture, especially the more that you are successful, the more that you benefit from privilege, the more power that you have,
Mhm.
people are very incentivized to construct narratives, to create cognitive chains that they then represent themselves to themselves as being incompetent, ineffective, powerless.
Mm-hmm.
Now the thing is, we hate that.
And that's as a response to their like knowledge deep down that they could affect more change than they are, which is the existential fear of freedom.
Yeah, it's not. So this is why I'm saying, like, using that example makes it easier to understand, but also makes it more likely that people will see it through a narrow lens. It's not a knowledge that you could do more. It's a fear that, think of it this way. You know, this is a thing that people sometimes conceptualize, right? That like, what if in philosophy, this is sometimes talked about as solipsism. What if you're the only real person? And everything else, reality, the universe, everything is a dream you've constructed. And secretly at the heart of it, you're in control of everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily about like specific actionable like things, behaviors that I could be doing otherwise, as
Mm-hmm.
it is just a general sense of like, I participate in / construct my entire universe, right? You have constructed, when we're talking consciously, you constructed your entire universe. Now,
Mm-hmm.
we theorize, and certainly it is useful to assume that a lot of what you perceive consciously
Mm-hmm.
is built in response to like observation of the actual shared reality, the physical
Mm-hmm.
environment that other people can
That's
see.
theoretically in other people's consciousness.
Right. Well, theoretically, other people exist in that same shared reality. How they interpret it and what appears in their consciousness is indeterminable. That's why there's that fun thought experiment about like, how do we know that what I see as red is what you see as red, right?
Mm-hmm.
We could theoretically both be looking at the same thing, but consciously experience completely different things, and it would be impossible to ever really determine. It's fun to think about, though. Like the idea that if you just all of a sudden were in someone else's consciousness, it would just be alien and confusing sensation nonstop.
When I was a lot more sad, I used to wish for it to just like be out of my consciousness in someone else's. Not like a wish for death, but like, a wish for jumping.
The processes that result, the non-conscious processes that result in me just seeing this mug, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are completely unique to me. It's all been built on top of each other. So if we somehow, obviously these aren't things that like physically exist that we could transplant, whatever. But if somehow you could observe the non-conscious response or the end result of those non-conscious processes, then I'm saying it wouldn't to you be like, oh, I see a red mug. It would just be like world-ending sensation, completely unnavigable.
Yeah.
This whole thing is so, I was going to say fragile, but that's not the correct word because it's actually quite stable for each individual. But it is so constructed. I don't know how to, it's just not useful to think about things to this level of, or on this level or in this way generally, so we don't. But if you do, it's hard to come to any other conclusion than like, you and I have completely separate universes, and I've created mine and you've created yours. That even to the extent that theoretically there is a shared reality on which we have kind of built our experience, our conscious experience of things, the actual material conditions of that reality have been different for you than they are for me. We can never have the exact same material conditions, not even when we're standing side by side looking at the same thing.
But the thing that scares me about stuff like that is I feel like viewing the world that way incentivizes people to not care about shared collective outcomes. So if it's...
See, I disagree.
Well,
I think that's a common thought in Western culture, but I disagree.
Yeah, but can you weave the thread to like, how can we acknowledge the isolation of consciousness and constructing your own individual universe that no one will ever have access to or understand, with also like having a really deep, because I know that you have this, Brandon, for yourself, because you do this, with also having a really deep sense of community and like urgency around helping others and
So
contributing to others like happiness.
the idea that those things are not like inherently correlated is something that we learn. And I would say that if we
Yeah,
like
can you
bring
help me unlearn it, please?
no, because we don't unlearn anything, but
Oh, can you
we
help
can
me
learn
new learn?
additional. Um, so there's I don't even know how. Okay, reality is chaos upon which we impose order in our like conscious processes in order to make it
Mm-hmm.
navigable, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why we care about utility, not accuracy, right? The fact that
Mm-hmm.
like I think of this as a desk in front of me impacts
Mm-hmm.
how I think and how I feel and I behave, and I use it in the way that I imagine that a desk should be used, and all of
Mm-hmm.
that works out really well to me. So great,
Mm-hmm.
no problem. Now, do I have an accurate understanding of every element of what this thing is? No. How could
Mm-mm.
we even separate out like, okay, well, why is the floor not part of the desk? Because
Yeah.
they're touching, but and everyone will be like, well, those are two separate things. But then why is the leg part of the desk instead of the leg and the top and the drawer? You know, like we
Mm-hmm.
conceptualize it in certain ways. And it's not to say that that's silly. That's not silly. It's incredibly, incredibly useful. It's what makes us human, and humans are literally the most effective things in the known universe as far as like having a conscious desire and then achieving
Mm-hmm.
results.
Yeah.
But because we're doing that, everything is getting built on top of made up stuff, right? Like every concept, every thought is
Mm-hmm.
something that we made up in our mind. That's not to say reality isn't real. It's to say that our conscious experience is not the same thing as reality. It's
Yeah.
just a map.
Yeah.
The map is not the territory, but the map is a useful representation, an abstract representation, leaving out data but containing some important data that helps us to navigate the territory more effectively.
Ooh, now I'm getting this image of like this magnificently chaotic universe that if you acknowledge it, you sort of transcend into this yearning to connect with people like deeper than you've ever felt before because you're more aware of how inherently isolated your own conscious process oh gosh are processes.
So,
I miss landing the plane, Brandon Tussers.
no, I think that's great.
But it's a
I'm saying,
beautiful feeling.
I'm saying all this as a way of getting to when we talk about culture, that's what we're talking about. Obviously, sometimes when we're talking about culture, we just mean like a group of people, a demographic, or whatever. But usually, when you and I in these contexts, when we're talking about culture, what we're talking about is like a shared set of ideas, beliefs, like ways of interpreting and perceiving things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are all made up. And there's no way to determine which
Mm-hmm.
ones are correct or incorrect, only which ones are useful or not useful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about like our culture is messed up, which we could say about any culture,
Mm-hmm.
what we're talking about there is that means that we all have messed up processes. We perceive things and think things and feel things and do things based on ideas that aren't useful at least some of the time. We apply sometimes it's useful ways of thinking, but we apply it
Yeah.
in different cases where it isn't. And so
Yeah.
here is some of what I would identify as like the core myths of Western civilization. To me, I think, and I don't know if
What?
other people think differently. To me, the core myth of Western civilization is the idea that natural man without civilization, is some kind of like violent
Yeah.
destroyer,
I think
right?
that's actually what I'm trying to get with the lion tamer thing. That like this like evil beast nature or something to be afraid of. Like, or is that not what you're
See,
saying?
well, sure. Okay, we'll start with this. That's just obviously and demonstrably untrue. Couldn't even
Yeah, it's
theoretically be
untrue.
true.
Yeah.
People will say
Yeah.
things like this is a commonly accepted. People will say something like what I'm about to say, and no one will object,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a very common thought to say things like, "Well, man is always been at war, right? Man is a
Yeah.
virus, a plague. Man, humankind is inherently violent and will always seek to conquer. That's just known not to be true. They're really like, we have lots of evidence, even if we weren't relying on logic, but the logic is also there, that like large scale violence isn't something that emerged until we had large scale societies, generally what we would start to call as like states or political entities. Because intrinsically, when like there's things like carrying capacity and blah 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 with evolution, but effectively there are processes at play that make it so that the group, when you're a herd animal like we are, that the group size more or less roughly comes out to like the optimal number of people to have in that group. And you don't have a bunch of spare people, right? Like losing any member of that group is a significant blow to the entire community. So no, we're not out there like engaging in violence all the time. And certainly not intra-party violence, you know, like against other humans. There's a reason that that's like collectively considered, and I'm talking about like on a, even like a Jungian archetypal, like collective unconscious kind of level. There's a reason that killing another person is like the gravest of sins in our deep, you know, human memory. You have to have like excess people and excess resources to be spending any of it on weapons of war and whatever. But anyway, this has been a myth for a long time, not just in Western civilization, but it's core to Western civilization. The idea that like man has to be civilized, that without a civilizing force, we will do inherently destructive or call it evil or whatever kinds of things. You know, we'd all be running around killing and raping everybody. Which obviously, ignoring the evidence of which there is an abundance, just the logic. If that was true, how did we evolve to the point where we created that civilization in the first place? How did we not all die off before?
It sounds like a colonialist narrative, right?
It certainly supports that way of thinking, and I don't know enough about the evidence and the history. I'm sure that people could, or maybe even do, make the argument that it is a convenient explanation after the fact for, you know, justifying colonial actions. But I would suggest that the whole point of like all of this that we're talking about consciousness and the way we perceive things and whatever, is that the belief, the understanding comes first, and that's what dictates the action. That it actually really, I mean, we brainwash. Literally, this isn't even a secret or an interpretation, right? When we send people to basic training for the military, we use brainwashing techniques to try and get them accustomed to violence, because it is very difficult to get people to hurt other people. I know we all, again, there's this myth that everybody's just like one, especially men, are just like one bad word away from unleashing all kinds of hell, but that's not the reality of it. And even when we do all that, people, when they do end up committing violence, will be like emotionally, psychologically wrecked from it for the rest of their lives. You know, like it's genuinely antithetical to the nature of being human. So what I'm saying is that I hear you conceptualizing it the way that a lot of people do, which is like, we need to do something in order to get to a place where we desire community and connection and whatever. But the truth is that that's where we start. That do you, Caitlin, as a human individual, when you cause somebody else harm, do you feel good or bad about that?
Awful, not just
and when
bad.
you make them happy, do you feel good or bad about that?
Good.
So even if it was theoretically true that they're fictional and you're the only real person, whatever that would mean in this scenario, it would still make you feel bad to do things which you perceived as being harmful to those people. So it's not something we need to be like, well, how can I overcome this, you know, the initial desire to just be like, screw everybody else, I'll do what's best for me. Now, that way of thinking and feeling is built into us because it is also inherently advantageous, right? Like it would be bad for a human, and I don't mean bad in the evil sense. I mean bad as in worsen your chances of survival, like lower the conditions of your quality of life, to cause harm to other people. We rely on one another for everything. So like we're evolved that way. We have an intrinsic built-in desire to make other people happy, to help other people, to be with other people. And yes, also an intrinsic built-in desire to benefit from those other people as well.
Mhm.
but those things exist in tandem. Nobody
Mhm.
likes feeling like they're getting a bunch from somebody else and not giving anything in return.
Mhm. Mhm.
It doesn't feel good to do that. And you might say, well, some people certainly seem to be fine with it. And I would say that those people have constructed narratives in order to
Mhm.
think of it as actually that that's not the case, right? The billionaires aren't thinking of
Yeah.
themselves as like, I get so much from everyone else and I give nothing in return. They think they're the ones giving everything.
Yep.
And of
Yep.
course, that's absurd. But like, there's
Yeah.
a reason we have to construct these narratives,
Oh,
and
that
we can do
reminds
that.
me, this local author, James Cleary is his pen name, but his real name is Jimmy DeVita. I just watched him do an interview, and he wrote an apocalyptic book, dystopian novel called Sanctuary. And he said as he was writing the billionaire character, he had to think of like a whole web of thoughts that led the billionaire character to do what most people who read the book will probably think of as evil things. But he's like, that's basic character development in theater is this person is making choices because they have like a set of beliefs that they have constructed that makes them think they're doing the right thing. They have a conviction. And so to like go back in the character's mind of like how does he decide to make this choice? So anyway,
Yeah,
it reminds me
that's
of what
great.
you just said.
That's one of the reasons I always used to love to play villains when I was acting.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Another like somewhat provocative way to say it, but I say this relatively frequently, that everything that every person ever does is the best option that that person had.
Mhm.
And being able to
Mhm.
look at it from the outside, even for that person themselves, outside of that
Mhm.
moment, being able to
Mhm.
look at it and say that was a terrible decision, either in the sense of it was like a lacking decision that was dumb, I should, a mistake, whatever, or
Mhm.
in the sense of that was an evil thing, to
Mhm.
do,
Yeah.
is possible and useful. And it isn't to say like we shouldn't do that, don't judge people. My point is that like the point of judging, which is something we all do and we have to do, is in order to guide like perception and action moving forward into the future, right?
Mhm.
If we if
Mhm.
we judge someone as being evil, somebody who doesn't care about other people's feelings, then that guides us to like not interacting with that person, isolating, insulating our
Yeah.
life from that person's ability to impact it, and so on.
Mhm.
The point of judging people is not because by judging them I have made their life worse, right?
Yeah.
Because I think they're evil, they're now in some way experiencing some kind of deprivation or pain or discomfort. It does nothing to them. It's
Yeah.
about guiding my thoughts and perceptions and actions. And so
Mhm.
we do this thing, we engage in it as though in and of itself it matters whether we think of
Mhm.
something as good or bad. And then we put so much effort onto changing the way that we think so that we don't think of something as good or bad.
Yep.
So that's one of these myths, is that without civilizing forces, we are violent and destructive. Another one
Mhm.
of these myths, I would say, derives from the same idea, or a different application of a similar idea, I suppose, is that we consciously rule our bodies. Right? That
Mhm.
there's
Mhm.
dualism in
Mhm.
philosophy. We call it dualism, which is the awareness of at least two aspects of the self that everyone has, and everyone. I'm getting distracted by all kinds of things. I know we need to wrap up soon, but
Yeah, we have to wrap up soon. We could do like a on the next episode of the This Is Not Therapy Hour, we will talk about other intrinsic myths of Western culture and the implications of them.
sure. I read an article, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, about from a philosophy professor talking about trying to teach about dualism, and that they had always started by saying like everyone has this experience, you all have it, right? And like ask people, and then as time goes on, fewer and fewer people are saying that they experience it, and the article was very much like a the kids these days kind of thing, like a lament for the new
Hmm.
generation. These kids aren't even
You
aware
don't
of it.
like that.
I generally hate that. Yes.
Yeah, you
Uh,
are like such an advocate for young people. It's so wonderful.
If you ask somebody whether they have experienced dualism, which is a universal experience, and they say no, it's because of a communication issue that they're not
Yeah, they don't know
interpreting
what
what
you
you
mean
mean
by
by it,
dualism.
or you
Yeah.
mean something different than what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dualism is just the idea, the understanding that the self, what is me, has at least two elements of it, a duality, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there's the body and the mind. And yes, everybody knows that because everybody goes to sleep.
Yeah.
So everybody
Yeah.
has periods during which you are not conscious, and yet your body
Yeah.
persists and still does things.
Yeah.
So we all know that, like, my body, the me, when we're saying I and me, we're talking about the consciousness mostly.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, sometimes we're talking about, I was tossing and turning in my sleep, is my body was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that dualism thing. And then we have a tendency to think in Western culture, Western civilization, the idea is that the mind should subjugate the body. And that's not exclusive to Western civilization, but
What do you mean by subjugate?
that we should exert conscious control. We shouldn't follow our impulses.
Yeah.
We should do what is right. And we can
Yeah.
say that in a lot of different ways. And many of those ways I think are very important and I very much agree with, right? That
Mm-hmm.
we should
Yeah.
think about what we do and how we impact others and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason that we say that stuff and talk about that stuff is because we don't do that automatically. We have to learn and effortfully do those things. We behave, our body takes action without conscious input the vast majority of the time. So that's the other big myth in this particular thing is this idea that we have conscious control or influence over the majority of what we do. And we do not. We have very little ability to consciously control. Now, we can consciously impact our environment, we can consciously override our behavior to a very small extent, and we can consciously do things that impact non-conscious processes, which are likely to change future behaviors and thoughts and feelings. And certainly, I'm not saying we have no impact, but it's a tiny amount. We just don't like to recognize that. So instead, we do this thing where we over index on it. We give too much weight to conscious desire. We look at what a person does, including us ourselves, and then we're just like, well, that must be what I consciously wanted to do or chose to do.
Yeah.
As opposed to like conscious was not involved in that.
Like essentially we mostly run on autopilot.
Yeah, you have to. By the very nature of what consciousness even is, you can only notice a very small.
Yeah.
If you're in a crowded restaurant with a bunch of conversations going on around you, we have this genuinely kind of miraculous ability to filter all that out and only notice what the other person that you're talking to at your table is saying, even though there's like dozens of voices going. And yet, if at some point, if you're doing this, Caitlin, and at some point somebody 2 tables away goes, Caitlin, you will notice that, right?
Yeah.
You didn't
which
consciously,
is amazing.
you're not consciously tracking everything everyone is saying and then just deciding to ignore other stuff. There are processes at play that automatically do that. So obviously your body, including the nervous system and non-conscious processes, because perception is not a body thing. It starts in the body, but perception is about changing things from physical to conscious. Your body and your non-conscious processes are monitoring way more than you could ever consciously monitor. How could we possibly be in conscious control of the majority of what we do when we're not even aware of 1/100th of all of the information that our body and non-conscious processes are aware of?
Yep.
And people get scared about that, so they construct narratives that are different. But then those other narratives, which can be useful, have some problems too, including that people think they're responsible for everything, and then they feel bad about everything. And then they have to construct narratives about this is wherever this all started, was this fear. People are afraid that they're powerless. People are afraid that they're incompetent, that they're dumb. Like genuinely, they don't want those things to be true. And yet they live in that. They think about that, even though they don't want it. And sometimes people look from the outside and they're like, I don't think you really are afraid of this. I think you're just pretending because you seem to talk about it a lot. When evidence is presented to you that actually you're intelligent, you still insist that you're unintelligent. Like, why are you doing this? But if I'm sitting on a couch surrounded by snakes and I'm telling you I'm deathly afraid of snakes, it makes sense for you to look at that and say, like, I don't think you're actually afraid of them because you're hanging out with them all the time.
Yeah.
But if you look at the broader context, and as badly as I'm afraid of snakes, I'm even more afraid of spiders. And everywhere else in the room is full of spiders except this couch. Then I'm still going to hang out on the couch and I'll be terrified and I'll hate it. But it's better than the other fear. So in terms of this fear that you're talking about, fear of the self, I think quite a common thing that comes up in our modern experience is people being terrified that they are deficient, that others don't like them, that they're failures, that they're frauds, that they're dumb, and we won't shut up about that stuff. We're talking
Mhm.
about that all the time. And those are real fears. We're not just making it
Mhm.
up or pretending. It's just
But
that
talk
we're
about the
even
fear
more
that
afraid of
they're
the
not
opposite.
saying. Yeah, what would the
The
opposite
other
of each one of those be?
is that I'm powerful. We're much more, and this isn't even me like making, there's a famous quote. I forget who it's from. I should really,
Well, it would be powerful, intelligent. What are the
so
other things? I
our greatest
can
fear is
influence
not that we
things.
are powerless. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure,
Hmm.
is the quote. And I'm paraphrasing. I'm probably getting it somewhat wrong. I should look it up again and remind myself who that is.
Hmm.
But anyway, yes, that like something that people will inaccurately identify as like a victim mentality, or just wanting to blame everyone else or whatever. It's understandable why people get those interpretations, but the thing that they're usually talking about is a person who is constructing narratives based on what they've been given, right? They've been given messages and ideas. They didn't make these narratives out of nowhere. They were given
Hmm.
these narratives, but they adopt them and live with them, even though they hate them, because the
Hmm.
alternative is even more terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was so nice to be back on the stream, Brandon Tussers.
Yeah, it's good to have you. We always get so philosophical. It's fun.
It is
It was
fun.
great to have you
And
back.
it's interesting. I'm thinking of Brandon, when you used to talk about like the creative process and just try making art and see what happens before you decide what you want to do with it or whatever. And I had a bunch of ideas about ways to potentially promote the stream or what to do with the stream, or like all these different things were coming in as we were doing it. And it was just a good reminder. Like
So
sometimes when I'm stuck trying to write a new composition, to just sit down at the piano and start plunking around and see what happens instead of trying to like design it in my mind before it nothing. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and you and I can follow up on this either next week on the stream or some other time when we have a chance to talk. But this entire conversation has been about creativity. That's what you said you wanted
Oh
to talk
yeah.
about at the
Yeah,
beginning,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so that's what I'm talking
Thanks,
about. And
Brosa.
like
Huh?
the enemy of creativity is an attempt to consciously control one's own thoughts and actions. Like
Yep,
you,
yep.
in order to be as creative as you can possibly be, and that we're
Mhm.
talking about whether that's in the artistic sense of creating art, but also in the sense of problem solving anything. You can be creative in the
Oh
way
yeah.
that you clean your house or do your taxes. In
Mhm.
order to be creative, you have to get the conscious control out of the way. You substitute
Mhm.
it with conscious observation. You just allow yourself to do everything by impulse and observe it, and then weigh in on like which direction to continue to focus on. Essentially,
Mhm.
your conscious thought, rather than being the director, becomes the audience. That
Mhm.
you just
Mhm.
do what you
That's so
do, and
nice.
then as you observe it, you're like, "Ooh, I like that," and as you like something, you naturally do more of that thing.
That reminds
So
me of Perdita Finn, who is Sophie Strand's mother. She just came out with a book, and I think it's called like Mothers of Magic or something. And she said she did this Instagram thing where she read a bit of it, and she was like, I honestly don't think I wrote this. I technically wrote it, but a lot of it felt like I was just swimming in these thoughts that were just kind of channeling through me. And she didn't say this explicitly in the book, but my impression is that it's one of her favorite books she's ever written, genuinely, like not just sales pitchy, but like,
so that's great. I love that. I don't know who that is. I don't know who Sophie Strand is either, so I don't care about that. But I like that. And this is like not new, right?
oh
There's
yeah. No,
reasons
I was
that
trying to give a
talking about
real example.
muses or channeling, uh, whether it's in art, whether it's in writing, in religion, in politics, in literally just like human interaction, right? I felt moved
Hmm.
to, we have this experience that we identify as like, I don't think of myself as consciously controlling this, just
Hmm.
observing this.
Hmm.
And those states are the states in which you are most creative.
That's what I like about archetypal role play. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
we should talk about it. But we'll wrap up and
let's
we'll be
talk
back
about it. Yeah,
next
it
week.
was so great to be here with whoever we were here with in the ether of the internet, as well as with you, Brandon.
Yeah, and you too. Thank you all. We'll be back same time next
Thank
week.
you, everybody. See you later.